Good evening and welcome. I'm Nancy Laturno, Executive Director of Mainly Mozart, and we are proud to partner with all of the great hearing scientists here in town for the annual ARO conference. Tonight we particularly welcome Deaf Community Services of San Diego, and we are happy to provide American Sign Language interpreting and CART captioning with smartphone link, which can be found in your program notes for our deaf and hard of hearing community. Tonight I am delighted to introduce to you a quartet that is reflective of the sort of artists that Mainly Mozart brings to San Diego throughout the year. World-class artists who gather primarily during the month of June for the annual for the annual Mainly Mozart Festival, this year celebrating our 30th anniversary. And our concerts are also held here at the Balboa Theater. Delighted to introduce to you tonight Euntaek Kim on piano, Eric Gratz violin, Brant Bayless viola, and Rainer Eudeikis cello. Enjoy the performance.
Good evening. Thank you for coming, and thank you for the beautiful music. About 600 years ago, and about 6,000 miles away, these instruments were invented. They were invented because they had a voice that needed to be heard. And these musicians pulled that voice out for us tonight. And these musicians can go bring us to another place, and they can bring us to another time by recreating the artistry from back in those days. Or they can use their creativity today to make new pieces and new art and new feelings from us. Because these instruments and these musicians have a voice. I'm going to speak about these instruments in the context of science and bring it to some principles that I hope to then transfer into the neurophysiology of hearing. First, let me describe my voice, which seems a little selfish, but I only use it to contrast to the beauty of these voices. And I'll describe some dimensions of sound that are comparable. So first, we'll talk about pitch. This is a low pitch. This is a high pitch, and that's the closest I'll come to singing because that is not what you came here to do tonight. The way the pitch is created is vocal cords in my throat bang together. And they bang together in a special way. It's kind of splattery. And that splatter creates harmonics. Harmonics are echoes of the frequency with which my voice box vibrates. And when I shape my mouth to different shapes, I can create different sounds. So at one pitch, I can say the same things, but because of the way I shape my mouth, you hear the vowels. You hear the ah versus the e and the oo. So the content, the importance of that splatter and shaping that splatter allows you to understand my voice for you today. And those are called harmonics, and it creates the timbre of my voice. Now, loudness. I'm not capable of getting very loud. And when I talk this way, the people to my left would hear me, versus if I talk this way, the people to my right. And so to compensate for these features, failures, I use technology to bring the sound to all of you without having to get out of my range. Now let's compare this to this instrument here, this beautiful instrument. I learned when preparing this talk that it's called a piano forte, because when it was invented, it was clear that it was capable of very soft to very loud sounds. Now, Euntaek is going to demonstrate how loud that piano can be and how soft that piano can be without any technology to amplify it. Thank you. Whereas my voice has a limited pitch range, maybe 2 octaves, the piano has 7.5. So its low is far deeper than my low, and its high is far higher. That sounds great. So I'm going to describe these sounds for you on axes, because I'm a scientist. But I'll use some nomenclature that musicians will certainly have familiarity with. So along the horizontal axis, the treble clef and the bass clef. Treble on the right, bass on the low. So if you'll follow this analogy along with me, so think of the low pitch on the left and the high pitch on the right. And loudness is the vertical axis. Piano at the low part, and forte at the high. And so on this grid, we'll paint our sounds. Now there's another dimension, and that's time. Because at every moment, there can be different signals. Different words from me, or different notes from Euntaek. Now I described the piano as being capable of quiet and loud, so the blue bar is very tall. But I told you that my voice is a bit more limited, so it doesn't go as tall as the piano does. And I described the piano as having a wide pitch range, and so the blue bar extends pretty far to the right, whereas my voice is stuck in the left. Now, maybe if I had a different voice, a soprano, you could have something higher, or alto. But the idea here is I want to convey to you these axes on which we can paint that sound. Now, this theater is beautiful. And I read a little bit about the history of this place. In the 1920s, this was built for vaudeville theater. And there was a pipe organ in the back. And there'd be a small orchestra here that would accompany what was happening on the stage. So the sound would need to come from the back and get to you in the front and be mixed with the people who are here. How does it do that? So if you look around you, you'll see that this place was built for a purpose. It was built for that. The curve of the ceiling coming down would funnel the sound down and onto us. And the walls here are shaped this way because if the sound coming out of the instrument would have been wasted, were it not for the fact that it could bounce off the wall and come to you. Even the angle of these seats is intentional, because if the angle is too sharp, you can lose some important frequencies to the whole signal, to the whole experience. So this theater is technology, and that technology allows us to enjoy this music from different times. And it didn't used to be that way, because music had to evolve with the technology of the halls. So imagine a cathedral with long hallways and massive granite or whatever they're, marble walls. And so the echoes that the sounds would make were so long that the music had to be slow, the chants, the organs that slowly moved up and down, because the echoes would get in a way with a signal if you tried to speak quickly there. So imagine a rap singer in a cathedral. It just wouldn't work. And the reason this is important is because sound going through air is actually kind of slow. I can hear my own echoes. And if I were to play it backwards, you'd really be emphasized. Our brain is trained to try to ignore them. But it's slow because the air molecules bang into each other, and then they bang into another set, and they bang into another set, and spread all around. So with distance, things also get quieter because the air molecules are so far apart, and they're slow. So what's less dense than air? Well, space. Because indeed, in space, there is no air, and so no one can hear you scream. Some of you probably remember that movie. And to go the other direction, into our oceans. Oceans are more dense, and so it's very easy for those molecules to bang into each other, and so they travel far and fast, which can create some problems of its own. That's the trailer for a movie that attempts to communicate the need to reduce the noise pollution in our oceans, because the whales can have a hard time communicating, and they've set up their whole ecosystem on their ability to communicate. Their relationship with each other has to do everything with that sound. So a little bit of anatomy. A couple things I'd like to teach you. One is if you were to go all the way down your ear canal and touch your eardrum, you're still in the outer ear. It's amazing how often you hear that described as the inner ear. And let's play a little game here. So Simon says, take your left finger and point it to your right eye. Simon says, take your right finger and point it to your right ear. Now, without moving your head, push them together until they meet. I didn't say Simon says. It's really important. Because if I did, you'd be touching your cochlea. And boy, would that hurt. Your organ of hearing, to me, the most beautiful organ in the body, is safe inside the densest bone in your body, behind your eye, and in the inside of your ear. I've been enamored with this organ since I was young. And when you're enamored with something, you end up with a favorite. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a point. I'd like to go back. Forgive me. The signals from the cochlea is a code. And what's really remarkable about hearing is the brain. Because the brain deciphers that code and turns it into magic, and turns it into emotion, and turns it into the whole point of why we enjoy this. Because hearing is about love. The love of the music, and the love of the person that you're here with. We fall in love because we have our conversations. And we fall in love with this music because it is so beautiful. And with hearing loss, if that's the foundation on which you've built your relationship, it can be hard to maintain that. I'm an audiologist, and people come to me with their hearing problems. But usually it's triggered by relationships. It's a spouse, or a parent, or even a child that's missing out on that communication that they're used to, and so they want to help their partner. Because it's not so much about the hearing as what people do with it. So I'd like to introduce you to my favorite curve. Who here has a favorite curve? I know that's kind of strange, but maybe you'll want to adopt my favorite curve because it's remarkable. Inside that cochlea are thousands of hair cells, and each has a voice. And this is a picture of each hair cell's voice. And I'll try to describe it in those same axes that I showed you before. So if I'm one of these individual neurons, and this is my curve, my favorite curve, I get really excited at a really quiet tone right there. That's my frequency. And when I hear that, I send that signal to the brain saying, I heard it, and it sounds great. And the brain puts it together with the thousands of other cells. If you turn it up loud, I'll respond to more, but because that curve is so pointy, it sounds so good. And like I said, I've got thousands of these things. So each of those curves is repeated over and over and over again in the low pitches and the high pitches. And some of them come on when it's really soft, and some of them come on when it's really loud. And so we end up with this resolution. This is like ultra-high def hearing, because there's so many little boxes. Each one of those voices is represented here by a little box. And so when I go put the piano and my voice on that grid, there's plenty of resolution to go around. So the ear is able to communicate clearly to the brain the difference, the obvious difference, between the beautiful piano and my voice. But this is the curve's nemesis. This curve. This is what the curve looks like when the hair cell's not working so well. And there are a few differences I'd like to highlight. First, with the orange arrow. The orange arrow points up. And what that means is the sound has to be louder for the nerve to hear it. Well, that makes sense. All you've got to do is turn it up, right? Well, not so fast, because the loud sounds are just as loud. So you can't make everything louder, otherwise the loud sounds are too loud. You have to only make the soft sounds louder, and that's tricky, because they often go together, soft sounds and loud sounds, like you heard in that beautiful musical piece. The other trouble here is it's slightly out of tune. That curve shifts a little bit to the left. And so my favorite frequency is now louder and somewhere else. But probably the most nefarious aspect of this nemesis is the width. I told you before how that neuron had its favorite frequency. And when that gets wide, it's almost like playing the piano with an oven mitt. It's unable to have the resolution that Euntaek has with the fingers. But there are technologies to help this. And what's also remarkable is that this doesn't happen the same way throughout the entire cochlea. It tends to be the case that your low frequencies sound better than your high frequencies. And so, if we overlay all those different curves, you can tell it's not going to be as resolute. And in fact, only the left part has that good resolution. So the left is high resolution, and that's demonstrated by little blocks, and the right is low res. That's kind of looking like with an old TV box that you've got to bang on to get the channel. So if we go back to that cartoon, and I were to play the sound to that characteristic hearing loss, I can only hear a corner of my voice, more of the piano because it extends more, but none of the harmonics. You wouldn't hear the difference between an ah and an oo. So this wouldn't sound good. You'd say, I hear you, but I don't understand you. I bet that's the saying some of you have either said or heard yourself. So what do? Well, in the part where there's still the good resolution, we turn it up in that special way, the way that only turns up the soft sounds but leaves the loud sounds alone. And on the right, that's a bit trickier. So we have a couple other tricks up our sleeve. I'd like to introduce you some technologies. And I was really lucky to be a part of inventing some of these technologies. First, on the left, is an app you can download today. It's called Ear Machine. And what this does is it allows anyone to adjust the sound for those parameters I described, of better hearing in the low frequency, maybe not as good in the highs, and those parameters that control amplifying only the quiet, but leaving the highs alone. Well, why is it free? Well, it's free because it was a result of research that came from the NIH, thank you. And it's also, I'm not sure how many people would buy it because it's pretty awkward to use. You gotta be plugged in with headphones. Some phones don't even have headphone jacks anymore. And the microphone's on the phone itself, so you might hand it across the table. But the great thing about it is it sounds good. Some people use it when their hearing aids are broken. Some people use it to find out what hearing aids might sound like. Well, I was very lucky in my career because Bose bought that technology and put it in a set of headphones. So the headphones here are very special headphones. We called them hearphones because they help you hear better. Isn't that clever? So it's like a mashup of a hearing aid with all those same technologies that help you hear better, particularly in noisy places. And both of these are meant for self-service. And that's why they cost less. Now, hearing aids have another job to do. They try to be hidden because some people feel shame for some reason. They work pretty well, but they're designed to be acoustically customized and physically customized to perfectly fit that hearing loss. So they involve the audiologist to make sure it sounds great. And further on the right is another technology called a cochlear implant. And a cochlear implant is that technology I told you about that can replace the acoustic sound with a direct neural signal. And that's why I label them across the top. A prosthetic is a device that helps your body do something, whereas a bionic is a device that replaces that function. The reason the bionic is so expensive is because it's a far more complicated device and also involves surgeons and hospitals. So people can find technologies across this entire range. The technology on the left is new. And my hope is that instead of people waiting a long time to get hearing help and start with the hearing aids, that they'll demand better hearing throughout their whole life. That will change the stigma of hearing loss rather than something that, I gotta do it and I've waited long enough that I have to. That it's more of I get to integrate better hearing into my lifestyle now. And if we do that, we can change the whole attitude around hearing so that we can maintain healthy hearing throughout our whole lives rather than put it off 10 years before doing something about it. Now, I mentioned that amplification and presenting those sounds was the job of those devices, but microphones do a really good job as well. Now, we've got directional microphones right on our head. Sounds in front of us are louder than sounds behind us because they stick out, some more than others. And you can amplify that, I won't touch the microphone, by cupping your hand behind your ear. That's giving yourself better directional microphones. And if you look at a cat, you notice they're really good at it because they've got big ears that stick out. So technology does this too. And all of these products are multiple microphones that allow the device to listen where you're looking, to help reduce background noise behind you. And you can augment that with extra microphones that you could put near the TV or you could put near a speaker for your personal listening experience. Because there's nothing better than proximity for clarity. My voice is so clear because I'm right on top of this microphone. Whereas if it wasn't, it might be harder to hear. Now, this theater is equipped with what's called an infrared assistive listening device. So somewhere up here is a light source that you can't see that's beaming a signal And if you checked out one of the devices that's at the ticket office, it would receive that signal directly. So all of the acoustics, all of the person sitting next to you who might be making noise, you can tune them out and tune right into the microphone content of the theater. There's another technology called a hearing loop, a telecoil, that many places surround the audience with a wire that creates an inductive signal that many hearing devices can decipher, so you can tune straight into that. Every subway in DC is telecoil looped. Many theaters, many halls, all kinds of places have this technology. And that's to transmit that signal from knowing what metro stop you're at or the music that's at a theater. If you want your music that's from your phone, you can pair it with your products over Bluetooth. These are ways of improving the signal because of that width, that curve is so nefarious, the nemesis. The last point I want to make about hearing loss and music is you can really give your ears a boost by watching live music. Because when you see Euntaek push the keys, you then hear them better, you truly do. As juxtaposed to the other instruments, it helps your brain decipher all this information because you see the physical movement that creates the sound, and your brain is able to integrate that with the pieces you've heard and some of the pieces you've not heard. And so the choice of seeing live music and the choice of which music to see can have a huge impact on your ability to enjoy music. An orchestra with 50 instruments would be difficult to decipher with very fast music and all that could sound very complicated. And it's by no means to simplify the experience, but you can really enjoy the experience if you optimize the chance of hearing what you came to hear. Because, and as I'll close, it really is about the love of music. It's so beautiful, it literally transforms us, but also the love of the person you're sitting next to, because that does too. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the science. We're going to go right into another musical piece, and good evening.
My name is Nina Kraus. I'm going to talk about sound ingredients for brain health. I'm a professor at Northwestern University working in our auditory neuroscience lab, which we call Brain Bolts. So we like to think about what we put into our bodies, and in many ways, we are what we eat. I hope to be able to convince you that we also are what we hear. So if you think about the ingredients of a seen object, it has a texture, a size, a shape, a color, and it's very concrete. And we live in a materialistic world, one in which if things aren't blingy and obvious to us, we don't tend to pay that much attention to them. And sound is a little bit like that, because sound has just as many ingredients as Dr. Franck told us: pitch, timing, timbre, phase. And these ingredients are invisible, and many of the world's most powerful forces, like gravity, are invisible. But sound is a very, very powerful force in our lives. And it needs to be right. It needs to be good. This is all about sound quality. Okay, so what we're able to do is the currency of the nervous system is electricity. And if we can put sensors on the brain or on the scalp, we can pick up the electrical activity that happens in response to sound. Right now, as I'm talking to you, the neurons in your brain that respond to sound are producing electricity, and we can measure that. And if we play a speech or a musical sound, we can see how good a job your brain does at distinguishing all these different ingredients of sound. How does it process pitch, timing, harmonics? I like to use a mixing board analogy because the brain processes each of these ingredients using separate mechanisms so that we can really understand where strengths are in someone who is a musical expert or any kind of a sound expert, or if someone has a disorder that affects auditory processing in the brain, there are certain bottlenecks and certain strengths. And it is important to know and to understand them. And now we are able to measure how the brain processes these ingredients of sound with unprecedented precision. So getting back to food, we know that there are certain foods that are good for certain body systems, and there are other foods that are not especially good for certain body systems. Similarly, I want you to think about what we do very much influences sound processing in the brain. What we do influences how we are able to process the ingredients of sound, and our experience in sound shapes our brains. So if you are someone who plays a musical instrument and your voice counts as a musical instrument, sound processing can be enhanced. If you hear sound through a hearing aid or any number of wearable devices, certain ingredients are enhanced, and your brain also learns and gets shaped by those ingredients and how they make your brain experience sound. We live in a noisy world, and if we hear a lot of noise, and I'm not talking about noise that is loud enough to damage our hearing, but noise that is just of a moderate level that can also influence how our brain processes these important sound ingredients. And finally, making sense of sound. Sound processing in the brain is one of the most complex jobs that we ask our brains to do. The brain needs to process these sound signals, which are happening very, very fast, and it needs to be processing these sounds with microsecond precision. There are neurons that respond faster than neurons actually can fire. So sound processing is very complex and very detailed, and you can imagine that if you get hit in the head, one of the first things to get disrupted is this very complex and delicate machinery. So, musical experience. We know that making music can enhance sound processing in the brain. And we can see this throughout the lifespan. And this is in people who, they don't have to be professional musicians, but people who regularly play music. And importantly, it takes time to change the brain. So our lab has conducted a number of longitudinal studies, both in Chicago public schools and with the Harmony Project here in LA. And what we have discovered is that the fundamental changes, the automatic processing in the brain, doesn't change after 1 year of regular music making. At least we didn't see any changes, but it took 2 years. It was after 2 years that we started seeing these changes in the brain's response to sound. So importantly, language and music coincide. And one of the ways that they coincide is rhythm. Now, rhythm is very obvious in music. Everybody knows there's rhythm in music. But there is also rhythm in speech. And I'm going to illustrate that to you.
Mr. Walker?
I am extraordinarily busy, sir.
I just wanted to ask about the chocolate. The lifetime supply of chocolate for Charlie. Well, when does he get it?
He doesn't.
Why not?
Because he broke the rules.
What rules? We didn't see any rules, did we, Charlie?
Wrong, sir. Wrong. Under Section 37B of the contract signed by him, it states quite clearly that all offers shall become null and void if, and you can read it for yourself in his photostatic copy, I, the undersigned, shall forfeit all rights, privileges, and licenses herein and herein contained, etc., etc., fax mentis incendium gloria culpum, etc., etc., memo bis punitor delicatum. It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal. You stole fizzy lifting drinks. You bumped into the ceiling, which now has to be washed and sterilized, so you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
So there's rhythm in speech. And it turns out that children who are very good at, for example, tapping along to a beat, also have better language skills. And what is lovely is that we can see this in the brain's response to sound. That red curve is the brain's response to the rhythm of sound. And we can see that it is the synchronizers, the kids who in fact can synchronize to a beat, whose brains automatically follow those rhythms, and they have better language skills. We also know that people who have excellent rhythm skills are better at making sense of sound in noisy, complex environments. Because again, there are rhythms in speech that one needs to make sense of. Now, music is one of the best signals for the brain. The brain loves music because it is regular, it has some regularities, and yet it also has a lot of surprises, so it's an interesting signal. As opposed to noise that really doesn't mean very much in terms of the sound to meaning connections that the brain wants to make. So we do live in a noisy world, and these moderate level sounds really do influence what happens to our brain's automatic ability to process sound. So, you know, the sound of a subway or of an air conditioner, these are considered safe from, they won't give you a hearing loss, but they will make your brain lose its precision of sound processing. And we know that the way in which the brain processes sound, again, as Dr. Franck mentioned, is that there are these beautiful curves, and they are arranged in an orderly and systematic way, kind of like a piano. And this happens throughout the brain. And animals that are reared with low-level noise have neurons and have nervous systems that have lost some of this beautiful tuning. So, as I said, sound processing in the brain is one of the most complex tasks that our brain needs to do, so that if we get hit in the head, this is really one of the very first things that we can see disrupted. And again, by measuring the brain's response to sound, we can get information about the impact of concussion at the acute stages as people are recovering, and also to look at the legacy of the long-term legacy. So the idea of music and medicine is an old one, but what is new is that music is now being used to address a number of brain injuries and medical disorders. And this is an encouraging time for science, because really for the first time, the National Institutes of Health have expressed an interest across their many institutes of funding research that helps us understand what it is that music does to us biologically, and what is the impact of musical experience and various diseases on the brain. So why is music so powerful? Well, making sense of sound engages many parts of our brain: our sensory, motor, our cognitive, and our reward systems. And music is a jackpot because it engages all of those systems. Now, with respect to cognition, I want to just show you something. Listen to a sentence. See if you can hear a sentence in this noise. Anybody here? Okay, now listen to, this is the actual sentence.
The juice of lemons makes fine punch.
Now you're going to hear the first sentence. So do you believe me? That what you know about sound influences how you hear it. So this is a test. I want you to raise your hand as quickly as you can every time you hear a tone, and then put it down. And do not, I repeat, do not raise your hand when you hear the siren. Those are pretty good. Always catch somebody. Okay, but importantly, people who actively engage in music making are better at learning what sounds to attend to and which sounds to ignore. And that's important, not just for music, but for all kinds of sounds in the world. So sensory motor, the way we move to music, the way we move together, synchronizes us and influences how we feel about each other and whether or not we feel like cooperating. I want to show you this video. Here are two babies that are, baby that is getting bounced in sync with an experimenter. Now, how is that baby going to feel about the experimenter? Is he going to want to help her?
Uh-oh. Oh, no. Uh-oh. There.
So here's the other baby. And this baby is being bounced out of sync. Is that going to affect how that baby feels?
Uh-oh.
Whether
Oh no. Oopsie.
so maybe we should get some of our heads of state to. Okay, so then there is the reward system. And we know that such a system exists. It's called the limbic system in the brain. And we also know that when we hear music that we like, as we anticipate the exciting part of a musical piece that we know, dopamine is released by the limbic system, by a particular part of the limbic system, just at that time. And dopamine, of course, very much affects our moods. There are other parts of the limbic system that release dopamine at the point at which the musical climax occurs. So we know that this neurochemical system in our reward system is being excited by music. We can use biology to inform hearing health. Imagine you have a hearing aid and it's not working especially well anymore, and now you can measure the brain's response to that hearing aid and measure the brain's response to another hearing aid or to a different setting. And you can compare and see, again, how these different ingredients might be processed, better or worse. And this can inform, I think, as we look towards the future, we can think about the hearing aid fitting and the development of all kinds of hearing devices is being informed by the biology, by what we know about how the brain responds to these different ingredients of sound. So biologically, we are what we do. And what we do very much influences how well our brain can process sound ingredients. Music making is certainly a thing that we can do that will enhance sound processing in the brain. And this is an exciting time because we're really in a position to be able to harness neuroscience to inform hearing and brain health. I invite you to visit our website to learn more about some of the work, but in particular, this advocacy link has the information about the influence of music and education on brain health, all in one place. So now, we're going to hear some brain blues. What is going to happen is that we will both hear the brain's response, how the brain responds to music, and we will be able to see that brain response. Now, how is that even possible? Imagine you have an instrument and it is producing sound, and that sound is being picked up by a microphone, and the job of a microphone is to transform the sound wave into electricity that then a speaker can play. Now, this little guy can listen to the sound coming out of the speaker, and his brain transforms the sound wave into the currency of the nervous system, which is electricity, and we can measure the brain's response, and we can play it out through a speaker. Now, notice that the sound wave and the brain wave physically resemble each other, and here is the sound wave, here is the brain wave. This is my favorite. Okay, so what is going to happen next is on this keyboard here, we have the response of the brain to every single note on this keyboard. And instead of listening to me, you are going to have the pleasure of listening to Danny Green who is going to play this brain, and his trio is going to improvise upon it. You see it? We don't see it. Danny Green. Danny Green and the brain.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There we go. Thank you very much. That was my first time playing the brain. Hopefully not the last. We are really excited to be here tonight. We are the Danny Green Trio. On bass joining me is Justin Grinnell. And on drums, Julien Cantelm. And tonight we're going to play a composition of mine. This is called When Opportunity Knocks. And it's a piece where I combine two of my passions, classical music and jazz. So I hope you enjoy it.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Santucci. I am an audiologist and have spent most of my career trying to save musicians from ruining their own hearing. Sounds funny, but it happens all the time. The company is called Sensophonics, and we design strategies and devices for musicians to keep their hearing intact. You've seen these headlines. In fact, the latest one is Eric Clapton, one of my favorite musicians, claiming he's going deaf. He'll still keep trying to play. Brian Johnson from AC/DC recently, the last year, had to go off the road because his hearing is so bad, and Phil Collins ends his career because of hearing. These are things I don't want to see happening, but it's going on. Why is it? Well, concert sound systems are really getting bigger and larger because the venues are getting bigger and larger. If you look at some of these venues, the systems have to be so large to get these crowds in stadiums, football stadiums, arenas. These are not meant for music. This hall is designed for music, like Kevin said, but the United Center in Chicago, where the Bulls play, is not designed for music. So we put up these big sound systems to try and reinforce the room so everybody in the audience can enjoy the show. But the problem is, the musicians are behind that system, and it doesn't sound that great. In fact, it's very muddy and loud, and it interferes with their ability to hear their own instrument. And it's pretty scary. You can ask any musician, coming up here and not being able to hear what you're doing is frightening. So what do? Well, they have these floor wedges. In fact, there's some up here. You see one there next to the drummer and one next to the piano player. And they face up at you so you can hear. And in each of those boxes, they put an individual mix for what you want to hear. And it seems to solve the problem of being able to hear, but the problem is there's so much competition. The crowd noise, the back of the PA, and of course, the drummer. We have loudness wars going on up there. The drums alone, 105 decibels, just for a rock drummer average. That means that everybody else in the band that wants to hear their instrument has to be 6 dB louder than that, just to hear themselves. And it's all driven by the drums. Now, if you notice here, the drummer has a wedge. This wasn't planned, by the way. He has a wedge. And why does he have that? Because he can't hear these two players very well because of his own drum kit. The piano player has a wedge because he can't hear himself that well because of these instruments. So the problem is they compete. One wants it louder, somebody else makes it louder, and it's his battle on stage. So what do we do about that? Well, you've seen these things in people's ears. Do you ever wonder what those are? All these performers now have these, what we call in-ear monitors. It's a better solution. I designed for all these musicians, and they wear them. Why do they like them so much? Why do you see so many people wearing them? Well, there's real benefits to this. And the benefits to in-ear monitoring are more me. That's what they want. When you listen to a mix on stage, everyone has their own mix. It's me, 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 and a few cues from the other musicians. It's not a full CD with you on top of it. It's just playing to yourself. It's better pitch perception. You have better timing because now the musicians are all getting the signals in real time at the same time. There's better quality and consistent quality between venues because you're not having to put these boxes all over the place. Okay? If you look at Taylor Swift, she can run around, go into the crowd, shake hands, and hear exactly what she was hearing on stage before she had to stand in front of a box. Reduce vocal fatigue. She doesn't have to sing as loud. She can hear herself better. Reduce feedback. There's no feedback loop. These boxes are gone, so it doesn't feed back anymore. And it's even quieter for the audience because there's no sound level on stage to mix over for you guys. And there's also the potential to reduce sound levels on stage and protect hearing without really compromising the sound quality too much. The problem is, though, even though these allow them to do that, we did a study at Vanderbilt University and asked 15 country musicians to compare. We wanted to see how much people turned down for ear monitors compared to floor monitors. So we told them to turn up their ear monitors to what they like and play, and we'd measure it. And we did that on 3 different occasions, and we did the same thing with in-ear monitors. And it turned out all 15 people turned all 6 trials exactly the same sound level. Didn't matter if it was Monday, Wednesday, on the floor, in your ear, you were going to turn it to the same level because your brain told you. If you've been playing guitar at 100 dB your whole life, you're going to put on ear monitors and turn them to 100 because musicians' brains are very plastic. Where is the protection? So we have to convince them to turn them down. And when they do, they realize it still sounds pretty good. But it's a behavioral change that has to occur. The in-ear monitor system, they're custom headphones. At least for the musicians, they love the custom ones because no 2 ears are alike. And you'll see on the left is a transmitter that sits with the sound engineer who sits on the side of the stage. Yes, there's one in the front like there is tonight. There's also somebody mixing for the band that's out of sight. There's a body belt pack that they get an FM stereo signal sent, and in that mix they get whatever they want with isolating earphones. A better picture here, and let's see if I can get this pointer working. You can see, maybe you can see, there's the soundboard sort of, and the transmitter, and they're sending this radio signal to this pack where this singer, she can hear whatever she wants. Now over here, the sound engineer at the side of the stage, this is Dave Matthews, sound engineer, he has individual mixes he's already put together for everybody on stage. They all have their preference. So he's sending those signals to them, and they're listening with a little body-worn belt pack with a volume control on it. Okay? Now, when I used to make these things, everybody wanted them not to show. I had a color wheel with 12 different skin shades on it, so they would disappear back in 1992. But now today, the true point of acceptance is when you bling them. That's what somebody told me. So now you see them all. Oh, Usher wants gold plate on his, and everybody has their designs that they want. They're going to show off their in-ear monitors. So now they become a badge of I've made it rather than, gee, I don't want him to show. What does that mean for you? Because it really kind of applies to personal audio as well. I always say to my high-def audiophiles, if your hearing's low-def, it doesn't matter how high-def the recording is. You have to have high-def hearing to enjoy high-def audio. The World Health Organization, who I work with, they only come into play when there's a pandemic. And they're predicting over 1 billion young people will lose hearing in the next 15 years. And a good part of that is because of these little devices that we listen to with earphones. I'm sure many of you listen to earphones with those devices, so what earphones are safest and best for portable listening devices? Now remember, we're thinking signal-to-noise ratio only. I'm not judging earphones on sound quality or anything else. It's just that isolation affords you the ability to separate the noise and not have to turn it up as loud. Of course, you still have to turn on the volume, just like the musicians do. So you all recognize these buds. We did some research. They take away about 2 decibels. My Pro Audio ones take away 31 decibels. So this is designed for an open ear. There's vents in it to keep the diaphragm moving, but it doesn't block out much. Sounds great, but it's good for quiet. When you're in noisy places, you're going to turn it up too loud to hear it. The same with these lightweight, non-isolating earphones. Again, safest in quiet. You recognize some of these. I try to keep the names away to protect the innocent, but this is noise-canceling headphones. They're great. And then a combination noise-canceling headphone and insert earphone that blocks more sound out. So we have now earphones that are attempting to get rid of some of the ambient noise around you. And of course, the most effective are insert earbuds. Although I've read people telling you that the deeper it goes in, the less safe it is, that is not true. And in fact, we get the greatest point of isolation way down into the second bend of your ear canal. So deep insertion headphones really block out the most sound, which means you can turn it down without worrying about ruining your hearing. Here we go. On the left and on the right are 2 different styles of earphones. They're all good, but the ones on the right I would try to use when it's not noisy if you care about your hearing. There is also, by the way, for those of you that go to a lot of concerts, if you do, there's high-fidelity hearing protection. We make it for musicians. In fact, a lot of these players here have custom hearing protection. So the custom ones come with filters, there's an electronic device, and over there on the top left are generics that are only about 12 bucks a pair, but they sound darn good. So I advise you to try and look into those if you go to see shows. My conclusions are there are going to be more things put in your ear than you can even imagine. There's a lot of hearables coming out, things that take your temperature, that take your heart rate, that'll tell you what language somebody's speaking, and they're all going to go in your ear. And so I can tell you that you want to get something that blocks out and creates a good signal-to-noise ratio when you're wearing something. Second, wear those high-fidelity plugs when you're around loud music. Keep your hearing intact, and try and get regular hearing evaluations. So protect your ears. I love my hearing. I hope you guys do too. Thank you very much. I also want to introduce our next trio. It's percussionists Jason Ginter, James Beauton, and Sean Dowgray, playing Liftoff by Russ Peck.
That was incredible. That was beautiful. That was the emotion. This is what it's all about, the passion that they made. Listen, a few quick announcements of gratitude. Mainly Mozart, the Danny Green Trio, the percussionists, the ARO that put this together, Bart Ziegler, without whom this wouldn't have happened. My colleagues who spoke to you tonight, and I also want to open the envelope like the Grammys for the awards of the scientists who won the vote for the work they did to teach us a bit about things. So number 3, David Goyer, Marina Silveria, and other partners from the University of Michigan and the University of Connecticut, come on down. Number 2, James Naples, University of Pennsylvania. And the top prize was awarded to the entire Albert Edge Lab for the incredible performance of the plight of the hair cells. It's an exciting time. Come on down. Thank you. Just wave to the group because you taught them a lot. I'll meet you here. Good job. David?
Let's get you together.
You were the number 3? Yeah. Which one are you?
It's number 3, too. Yeah.
Number 3? Come, okay. Great. Congratulations. You're welcome. Missing a few more, you've got a whole troupe. Congratulations. Come on. This is really exciting because you guys are really bringing science to music, and this is really what it's all about.
Once they can, the rest of them are.
They're too shy to come up.
I'm going to shoot a couple of these and get a better headshot. There we go.
All right, great. And you're welcome. About 40 steps away across the street is the dive bar, where you can come and join us afterwards and chat the whole group up. And we want to close by having another piece from the Danny Green Trio. So thank you so much. This was a lot of fun for all of us.
Thank you very much. This last piece that we're going to play is off of our 2016 release, and the name of it is called The Merge.
Thank you.